Okay, so in this video we are going to be covering 4.1, and I actually think that we've already done the first problem and part of example 2, but I'm going to go ahead and just start from the beginning. So for the first example, for the first example, we're going to have a slope of -7/9, and they're going to give us a y-intercept of 0, 16, okay? So remember, when you're given a y-intercept, that's actually, it is the point xy, but specifically for y-intercepts, that's always going to be the point, 0b. So if that first coordinate, or your x value, is a 0, then you know that that's going to be a y-intercept, and that y value is the same thing as b, okay? And for this question, we want to find the equation of the line, or a line, okay? So whenever you see that, that means that you need your answer in the form of y equals mx plus b. And you're going to be plugging in for your m and your b, okay? So the question is, do we have everything that we need for this problem? Do we have our m? We do, they gave it to us. And do we have our b? We also have that, since this first coordinate is a 0, okay? So we can just go ahead and plug that in. So y is equal to m, which is -7/9, x plus b, which is 16, okay? And that would be our final answer. Perfect, okay? Moving on to example 2. Okay, say we're given m is equal to -2/3, and that the line passes through the point -3, 6, okay? And we're also going to be looking for the equation of the line, okay? So again, whenever you see equation of the line, that means we're looking for y equals mx plus b, and we need to plug in for our m and our b, okay? So what do we have here? Do we have our m? We do, they gave that to us. What about our b? Okay, can we use 6 as our b? This is our xy, right? Okay, in this case, we cannot just take the 6 and plug it in for our b. The only time when this works is when it's a y-intercept and we have the point 0b, okay, or 0 with any number in the second coordinate, okay? So there's 2 ways to work this problem. For the first way, way 1, we'll go ahead and just use the information that they gave us, okay? So we have our x, a y, and we have an m. So we're going to plug that into our equation, okay? So we have 6 for our y is equal to m, which is -2/3. And then times an x, which we have as -3. So -3 plus b, okay? So now, since we have an equation and there's only one unknown, we can solve for that b and then go back in and replace it, okay? So I know you guys don't like fractions, but again, the easiest way to get to work with fractions is to make everything a fraction. So this -1, I'm going to change to a fraction, -3, by placing it over 1, okay? So when you have 2 fractions, you can multiply straight across on the top and straight across on the bottom and then simplify. Or we can see that this 3 and this 3 on the top will cancel out into 1s, okay? So now we have a 6 is equal to, because this is a negative fraction and this is a negative fraction, we'll get a positive. And that's going to simplify to 2/1, right? Multiply straight across on the top and straight across on the bottom, okay? So that's going to give us a 2. Positive 2 plus b, okay? And now we can solve for our b by subtracting our 2. And we have b is equal to positive 4, okay? So the last thing that we need to do is to plug it into our equation of line where we plug in for our m and our b. So our m, they gave it to us. Y is equal to negative 2 over 3x. And then plus b, which we just found was 4, okay? So that would be our final answer. All right, so way 2. We're gonna need the point slope formula for this. Okay, so we have the point slope formula, okay? And that's going to be y minus y1 is equal to m, x minus x1, okay? And we're plugging in for x1 and y1, okay? So, and also for our m, right? Okay? So we already have our m, and now the point that they gave us, x and x1 and y1, we can use the point that they gave us, the negative 3 and 6, okay? So I'm gonna go in and rewrite that. So we have y minus minus 6. I'm gonna go ahead and fill in with parentheses, right? Whenever you plug stuff in, you can use parentheses. I'm gonna go ahead and write negative 2 over 3 here, and then x minus our parentheses, okay? So we can go back in and plug those values in. So we have a positive 6 here and a negative 3 here, okay? So simplify, we have y minus 6 is equal to negative 2 over 3. And we have x, and this minus and negative will become a positive 3, okay? And last, we need to get y by itself to get it in our slope-intercept form, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and add this 6 to the other side, okay? Because all this stuff is going on where this negative 2 over 3 needs to be distributed, I'm going to place the 6 on the outside, okay? If you want to go ahead and distribute that negative 2 over 3 to both of those terms or parts, you can do that and then add the 6. But I already wrote it, so I'm gonna stick with what I'm doing, okay? So we have y is equal to negative 2 over 3, x plus 3 plus 6, okay? And now we need to distribute that fraction to both of our terms or parts. And we have y is equal to negative 2 over 3x. And then we'll distribute that. So we're gonna have negative 2 over 3 times 3, right? And over here, we already found that that's going to give us either a positive or a negative 2, right? Since we have a negative here and a positive here, that's going to give us a positive 2, a negative 2, negative 2, and then plus 6, okay? And now we can combine our like terms, okay? So that negative 2 plus 6 is going to send us right back over here to that plus 4, okay? So however you want to get to the answer is completely fine. There's multiple ways to do it, and I don't mind, okay? Cool, so now we'll move on to example 3. And remember, when I'm doing the multiple ways of solving a problem, you can choose whichever way that you want to do it. It doesn't matter, as long as you get to the correct answer, okay? So, example 3. Let's say we have a line that passes through the point 2, 3, and the point 1, negative 4. And we want to find the equation of the line, okay? So again, remember, whenever they're asking for the equation of the line, we are looking for y equals mx plus b, and we want to fill in for our slope, and we also want to fill in for our y-intercept, for our b, okay? Okay, so did they give us the slope? No, they didn't, but they did give us 2 points, okay? So we can go ahead and label our points. This is gonna be x1, y1, and this is gonna be x2, y2, okay? So how do we find a slope when we are given 2 points? This is something that we've talked about previously. So that's going to be, remember, it's rise over run. Rise is related to up and down, or your y values. That's why your y's are going on top. And your run is left and right, which corresponds with your members of the x. Members of your x's, okay? So that's the equation for finding the slope when you're given 2 points. And we can go in and just plug this in, okay? So we have -4 minus +3 over 1 minus +2, okay? -4 minus 3 is going to give us -7. And 1 minus 2 is going to give us a -1, okay? 2 negatives are going to make a positive, and that 1 on the bottom is just gonna disappear. So we're gonna have a +7 for our slope, okay? So now, what do we have? We have 2 points and a slope, but we need to figure out how to find our b, okay? So just like in the previous example, you can work it both ways. You can either take the original slope-intercept formula and pick a point and plug it in and plug in your slope as well and get to the solution, or you can use the point-slope form and do it that way, okay? Either way doesn't matter. It doesn't matter which way you get to the answer, excuse me. So however you want to work it now is completely fine. But for the purposes of this video, I'm going to work it both ways, okay? So way 1, we're going to just pick a point, an x and a y, and then we already have our m, and we're just going to plug it into our regular equation, okay? So our y, I'm gonna choose this one. So our y is 3, y is equal to m, our m is 7, x is now 2, plus b, okay? 7 times 2 is gonna give you 14, plus b. And then to get b by itself, we need to subtract 14 on both sides, okay? So when we do that, we get b is equal to -11. And now that we have our b and our m, we can just rewrite the slope-intercept and plug in the numbers that we need. So 7x plus b, and b is -11, so that's actually going to be -11, okay? So that would be the final answer. All right, so we also have, this marker's kind of running out, or pen, I don't know what these are. Okay, so we also have way 2. All right, and that's going to be using the point slope formula. So we have y minus y1 is equal to m, x minus x1, and we're going to be plugging in for these variables right here that I've underlined, okay? So I'm going to stick with this 2 and the 3 that we have with the star next to it and plug those values in. So we have y minus y1, which is now 3, equal to our m. We found that our slope was 7. And then x minus x1, and our x1 is a 2, okay? So before I add a 3 like I did on the last example, I think it would be best to go ahead and distribute that out. I just didn't want to mark up my paper. I was running out of space. But yeah, I think the easiest thing to do would be to distribute the number on the outside first. So we're going to distribute that 7. And then we're going to add that 3 on both sides, okay? And we're going to add it to that -14 because we can only combine like terms, all right? So we now have y is equal to 7x, and -14 plus 3 gives you -11, okay? And that's the same answer as we found in way 1, okay? So again, however you want to work the problem is completely fine. All right, so next I'm going to do some definitions. We need to be looking at the definition of parallel lines and perpendicular lines. I'm sure you guys have seen this before, hopefully, but let's look at them. So we have the definition of parallel lines. Parallel lines. Okay, and that's denoted as a little railroad track, right? And all that means is that the equations, the linear equations, so this will be one equation and that would be the other graph of the equation, excuse me. All it's saying is that both of the graphs will have the same slope, okay? So let's look at an example of parallel lines and look at an example of not parallel lines, okay? So for our example, or examples, I'm gonna do two here. We could have on our XY plane something that looks like this, okay? So this could be x is equal to -4, and this could be x is equal to, I don't know, -3, okay? Or 2. It actually looks more like a 2, right? So in this case, our slope is undefined, but it's still going in that same direction. So whenever you have parallel lines, that is going to show up in the graph and they'll have the same type of slope. And that means going in either direction, they will never ever cross paths, okay? You can also have something like this. Okay, so this could be y is equal to 2x plus, I don't know, 4, whatever. It can be whatever it wants to be. And this could be the equation y equals -2, excuse me, +2 minus, that's where the minus is supposed to go, -3, okay? So basically, since you have the same slope, they're both +2, right? This is in the form y equals mx plus b, then those will be examples of parallel lines, okay? Or equations that share the same slope, okay? A not example would be something where the graphs actually intersect. So say you had this graph, and then you had one like this, okay? So because at some point in time they intersect, that means that they are not going to have the same slope, which means they're not parallel lines, okay? Cool. And now let's do the definition of perpendicular lines. Perpendicular lines, okay? And that's denoted like this little upside down T, okay? And this holds true if the slopes are negative, excuse me, not negative. Yeah, actually negative reciprocals. Sorry. So negative reciprocals, okay? So all negative means, you could say opposite if you want. Some people say opposite reciprocals. So if it's 4, then it's -4. If it's 2, then it's -2. If it was -1, then it's +1, okay? So negative just means the opposite side of whatever you had, and reciprocal just means you're flipping, okay? So another way to think about that is if you have the slope, this is slope 1, that's going to be equal, not equal to, excuse me, yes, that's going to be equal to -1 over the second slope, okay? So an example of this let's say we have, let's say slope 1 is 4, and we want to have perpendicular lines, okay? So that means that the second slope has to be the negative or opposite sign. So we know it's going to be negative because M1 is positive, and that's going to be the reciprocal. So how do we make 4 a fraction without changing the number? We just write over 1, right? So 4 is the same thing as 4 over 1. So if we want to take the reciprocal of 4 over 1, that's going to be 1 over 4, okay? So that would be an example of perpendicular lines. All right, in a graph, you could have something like this. So this could be x is equal to, 3.5. And then this could be, x, excuse me. And then this could be y is equal to -4 per se, okay? So here, our slope is undefined, right? Does not exist. And here, our slope is 0, okay? So remember, when something's undefined, that just means you have something on the top divided by 0, okay? So if you were to flip this, that's gonna give you 0 over something, and anything where you have 0 on the top is always gonna be 0. And -0 is the same thing as +0. Well, you know what I mean? Like, it's the same thing. It's always gonna just give you 0. There's no such thing as like a negative or positive 0. It's just 0, okay? So a thing to note here, perpendicular lines are going to have a 90-degree angle, okay, at their intersection, okay? Cool. So those are the two things we need to know. For parallel lines, we need to have the same slope. And for perpendicular lines, it's going to be the opposite sign or negative, reciprocal. So if it's not a fraction, turn it into a fraction and then flip them, okay? So let's go ahead and look at some examples of that. So this is example 4, I think. Hold on one second. Yep, example 4. Okay, and the question wants us to figure out whether it's parallel, perpendicular, or neither, okay? So that means that neither of those definitions hold true, okay? So for the first one, for 4a, we're going to have y plus 2 is equal to 5x, and 5y plus x is equal to 15, okay? And we want to know whether that's perpendicular, parallel, or neither, okay? So the first thing that we need to do is figure out what our slope is. And with these equations, it would be easier if we set it up into slope-intercept form, right? So if we get it into the form y equals mx plus b, we'll be able to tell what our slope is easily because it's our m, right? Okay, so that means we need to get y by itself. So over here, the y has a plus 2 connected to it, right? Remember, pluses and minuses separate our parts, and the only way to get rid of it is using pluses and minuses. So we'll have to subtract 2 on both sides, okay? Remember, you cannot subtract the 2 from this 5x because they are not like terms. So that's going to be y is equal to 5x minus 2. And now we have it in the proper form. So our slope in this equation is 5. Okay, over here, pluses and minuses separate our parts. Before you unattach that 5 from that y, you need to get rid of your part first. Get rid of your part first, okay? So that means we're going to need to subtract x on both sides, okay? So that leaves me with 5y is equal to, that's gonna be 15 minus x, but I'm gonna go ahead and flip them. So that's gonna be negative x plus 15. Okay, you could write 15 minus x if you wanted it and then just switch them. That's fine also, okay? And then to get the y by itself, we divide each part by 5, okay? And that leaves us with y is equal to negative 1 over 5x, right? We can pull that x to the front because this is all one part, okay? And then plus 3. So now we have the slope of negative 1 over 5. Are these the same? Negative reciprocals or neither? They're negative reciprocals, right? We have 5, and then we have 1 over 5, and the sign has changed. So in this case, the answer will be perpendicular. Okay? And that would be the final answer. Let's look at B. So we have 2y plus 4x is equal to 8. And 5 plus 2x is equal to negative y, okay? So I'm going to let this be one of the questions that you guys turn in to me. So I need you to tell me if 4a is going to be perpendicular, parallel, or neither, okay? And then I also want you to do 4c for me. Okay, and I'll write it down real quick. So for C, we have the equation 2x plus 1 is equal to y, and y plus 3x is equal to 4, okay? So for B and C, I want you to do those problems for me and turn them in. And I want you to tell me whether the equations are perpendicular, parallel, or neither, okay? And you base that off of what the slope is. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop here, and we will wrap up the other questions in this section later.